What's up, guys? It's Rob here, and today we need to talk about the potential for a fourth stimulus check in the United States. All right, we've gotten three already, and I know the money was much appreciated by a lot of people, but we're going to talk about a potential fourth stimulus check that a lot of people have been harping on about for a while now. And we're also going to talk about some of what that might bring with it, right? Some of the good and some of the bad. So we're going to start off taking a look at this article right here titled Fourth Stimulus Check 2022. The criteria to receive a $1,400 payment. So essentially, this article just goes on and talks about how there are a bunch of people calling for a fourth stimulus check in the United States, and they're doing it because of a couple of reasons. First, they want to have additional support during the pandemic that people are currently suffering from, and they think that the federal government has not been providing enough aid as of late. And they think it's unlikely that the federal government is going to provide this kind of aid. So they're actually pleading with the states, right? They're asking the states at the state level to provide stimulus checks to people. But get this, the reason that they're calling for these stimulus checks, it's actually the most counterintuitive reason why you would ever expect for a stimulus check to be called for. They're saying that people need stimulus checks to combat the latest rise in inflation, okay? They're saying that these rises in inflation are causing a lot of pain on people's wallets, and so they want stimulus checks to come out at the state level to help support them. And if you think about it, that's actually the exact opposite of what you want to do in a high inflation environment. I mean, these stimulus checks would only serve to increase the demand that people have for goods, thus raising the price of goods even more, creating a never-ending cycle of needing to pay a ton for everything that you want to buy. So it would actually be a very poor reason to implement these fourth stimulus checks. And not just that, there's also a petition with over 3 million signatures to get $2,000 a month to every American. Hashtag money for the people, hashtag the pandemic, right? And this plan is, in my opinion, something that may eventually be necessary in the country once automation gets to a certain point where there aren't very many jobs available. But as of right now, it doesn't actually make a lot of sense, in my opinion, to start giving out universal basic income to everyone. Now, of course, that's just my opinion, and I, as well as everyone, appreciate when free money is handed out to me. But in this situation where the United States is positioned as they are, it might not make the most sense. And we're going to talk about why, okay? Because, sure, everyone would love $2,000 a month coming straight to their inbox. In fact, I would love 2,000 subscribers a month coming straight to my inbox. So if you want to go down and subscribe to the channel, feel free. Now, this chart actually depicts pretty well why the additional stimulus checks or additional recurring payments would not be ideal for the United States. And it is a chart of the national debt of the U.S. from 1990 to 2021. And you can see that it has increased dramatically, especially during the years 2020 and 2021, right? We've basically been going straight up, at least in 2020, when we were spending all of that money fighting the pandemic and sending out stimulus checks to people. We spent so much money, dramatically increasing the national debt. And a lot of people talk about the national debt all the time, but what they don't seem to account for is the fact that the national debt is a real issue, right? It seems like whenever we're talking about the national debt, it's just about will the government decide to raise it or not. But what people don't seem to mention is that it actually could be a big issue, because if you think about the national debt, which just hit $30 trillion for the first time, we're currently sitting at $30 trillion, $19 billion, $251 million of national debt. It's actually a big problem because it's very similar to a person with a credit card. And if you think about a person with a credit card and you put the United States in that person's shoes, right? Let's say that the United States is a person with a credit card. It's essentially the same thing as just perpetually taking out a ton of credit and never paying anything back, right? When you look at the trade deficits that we've currently got, right? We just posted record trade deficits in 2021. The trade deficits increased 27% in 2021 to an all-time high of $859 billion for the year. Now, this is very scary stuff, because if that was a person who was taking out all kinds of debt on their credit card, well, all of their friends would tell them that's a horrible idea. Their family would try to stop them. Their banks would actually cut them off and stop giving them new credit cards and new lines of credit if they were making such little money that they needed to take out tons of debt every year, and perpetually were just increasing the debt that they were taking out for 30 years in a row, right? If they were never making enough money to actually pay down their debt, and they just kept taking out more and more to fund this extravagant lifestyle that they were living, then eventually they would be cut off. Now, the difference between the United States and a person is that nobody's going to cut off the United States, at least not right now, because the dollar is the reserve currency. So people like to hold on to dollars. So whenever we print all of these dollars and pass them out, people are happy to take our debt off of our hands, right? They're happy to take those dollars and give us out those loans. And what we end up using those loans for is actually this trade deficit stuff, right? We essentially give this money to the people, or the United States gives it to companies in the forms of contracts, or the United States pays federal employees, and then they have money. And those people then buy goods. And most of those goods, well, at least a lot of them, come from China. They come on these huge ships. And that is what's causing this massive trade deficit, right? We are not producing enough stuff for ourselves. So what we do is we print all of this money, we hand it out to people in many different ways, and then those people can go and buy stuff that's not made in the United States. Now, the downside to this is that it's not sustainable, right? It's not a sustainable system. It's essentially just like using credit cards. You can use those credit cards for only a certain amount of time before people get fed up with it and are unwilling to give you additional credit. And the United States certainly has a lot longer than a normal person with a credit card has to keep accruing this debt, right? The United States, once again, it has the reserve currency. The dollar is the reserve currency, and people are not going to give up on the United States anytime soon, hopefully. But it is something to think about when you're talking about these stimulus checks, right? You don't necessarily want to just keep taking out debt and devaluing the dollar, because we are actually seeing a dramatic rise in inflation. And that could be a trigger that could set off some people in other countries to stop looking at the United States dollar as a very secure currency. If they see that the United States is being incredibly irresponsible, and I'm not saying that it's been very responsible in the past with all of this debt that it's been taking out, but more recently you can see the increases in debt have become much more dramatic. And if that continues, then other countries are probably going to start looking at the United States dollar as a less stable currency, right? They're going to look at it like we really are taking advantage of the situation, and we certainly have been over the past many years when we've been posting these huge trade deficits, just printing money and handing back nothing in exchange except paper in exchange for all of these shipping containers full of goods that we use every day. And it's not a good situation to be in if you're in the United States, right? You really don't want this to be your situation. In fact, you wouldn't want to be living in a household with someone who is taking out all kinds of credit card debt. So it really is a worry that people should be thinking about, and probably shouldn't be talking about making additional payments and just taking out more debt to fund these payments, especially not to combat inflation, right? Because that just doesn't make sense in the first place. It seems like a death spiral that you would get into very quickly if you did end up just taking out more and more debt to try to pay for the higher costs of goods that the markets are essentially telling you, your money, you have too much money and there aren't enough goods. And that's why inflation is persisting. And if you just print more money to combat that so that people have more money to spend on those goods, then you're going to end up in a situation where you're paying $1 million for a loaf of bread, just like we saw in Germany way back when. And we're seeing currently in other countries like Venezuela. They're currently going through a period of hyperinflation, and they're having to pay hundreds of billions of dollars for a chicken or a piece of cheese. And it is really crazy stuff. It's not the kind of place where you want to live. So that was just my thoughts on the current inflationary environment, as well as what I think about these fourth stimulus checks that people are talking about. And once again, I would love to get some free money. I'm sure everyone would love to get some free money, but there are probably better ways to go about it than just printing money and taking out debt and handing that out to people, right? So other than that, guys, once again, not financial advice, but if you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe. And other than that, have a great day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.